So the Great Exhibition for me marked the end of amateurism and a form of openness in electrical experimentation, including popular stage shows of galvanism, magnetics and other species of electricity, which had run from the late 1700s on through the 1840s, with performance by Faraday and Sturgeon's popular electricity in London clubs. What's important about this for us, or that we all know about, is that the nephew of Galvani, which is where galvanism comes from, actually would like take people that had just been executed on the table, electrocute them and bring them slightly back to life. And of course, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein comes from there. So a lot of our ideas about technology come from that time. And at that time, electricity, they didn't think of it in the way we think of it. We think that a battery and a bulb are electricity, but for them, the battery is galvanism. That's about the electricity in your body, not the electricity from heaven. So they have a very, very different notion to us. And what the Great Exhibition does is it professionalises it. Suddenly all the amateur groups are lost, the Royal Society gets very strict, the papers get very technical, and what they try and do is dismiss all those people that are experimenting in their shed or just saying they're nonsense, you know, they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. And so it takes electricity away from us and gives it to a kind of professional class, if you know. There's an important event that happens just before, in 1848, in Trafalgar Square. And this is really interesting that electricity at that time, the municipal authorities would use, there's a big demonstration of an electric bulb in Trafalgar Square. So they illuminate that area for the first time. And of course, what are they saying with that? Why are they putting up an electric light so bright? It's because they're showing their power. They're showing their power over nature, the municipal authority, but they're also showing their power to illuminate those dark areas in which crime would happen. They're showing that they've got this gaze into the unseen darkness that was never there before. And this happens right across America and right across the UK. So it's a very interesting moment. Kind of computers come from the kind of military complex in the United States, in the kind of Cold War, and it all emerges out there. In fact, what's really interesting is that the Great Exhibition had really, really bad tea and cakes and sandwiches. They were appalling. And this inspired a small company to set up, a little while later, the Joe Lyons and Co. Tea Company, setting up 250 small cafes up and down the country. And those were places for women who were first liberated by going to work. That was the first place you could go and sit down by someone you didn't know and have a cup of tea, have some cakes, you know what I mean, and have a liberated space in the public. Because you couldn't go in a pub before if you was a woman. So it's really interesting. Also, they implemented scientific management, which is Taylorism, to such a degree that they were so efficient. They were one of the most efficient companies before the Second World War. But they were really appalled that they had thousands and thousands of people having to add up all the receipts in a room. And they said this was worse than being on the factory floor, because on the factory floor you could chat to your mates. But in there, you had to just sit there and type in these numbers all the time. And they went to America and they come back and they produced the world's first electronic business machine, which was the first world's business computer in 1951. The first computer programming, and it comes from tea and cakes. It doesn't come from, you know, Cold War. The other really interesting thing about that is that they produced the first database, and it's databases that we all serve. It changes our conduct. We have to feed it. It's that creates crisis in our companies because the numbers are not there, or the numbers are this, or the numbers are that. Anyway, so that's a nice story about that bit. The Shanghai Expo, which Simon spoke of, I think marks the world's largest cover-up. I think people work in as bad or worse conditions than those who produced the goods for the Great Exhibition 160 years ago. And I know this, I've been doing a project on coal, and 91% of mines in China are unregulated. That means that if 6 people die in an accident, they're not even recorded because they're day workers, they don't have a proper job. So it's 91%. Okay? That comes back in all the goods we buy. So we imagine that we've moved on, but actually the medieval is still out there. You know, slavery of kinds is still out there. It's not that we've moved on, it's just that we've displaced stuff, you know, under carpets somewhere else in the world. And also another thing, I'm just going to add one little bit in there. I just heard that the container ships that are going to come past here, they're 4 times as large as the one now. They produce the pollution of the equivalent of 8 million cars, each one. It is I was really shocked. It's 8 million cars, which is a bit shocking. And that comes southwesterly on us. Okay, open data is more about control, not state, not corporate. Recently, the government put MPs' expenses online. I don't know whether you've all seen this, so that we can all look at them. And this is an attempt to kind of gain kudos from the equality of gaze. Equality of gaze is like when you have a data set, what you do is you try and look at it to see what you want to bring as the foreground, what you want to put in the background. So what the government does is it says, well, you can all now see what MPs' expenses are getting. You can monitor them, you can survey them. And so what it's trying to do is attract that power of giving you that gaze to itself. And that's very new. You know, I'm not trying to say it's good or bad, I'm just saying that it's new, that that kind of gaze is now has kind of a kind of political agency. I don't know whether you know that the first telegraph that appeared is actually a visual telegraph. And it appears in France in 1791, with the French Revolution. And even though the system of sending codes visually was around for a couple of hundred years before, and Dolland and Aitchison made a telescope that you could see 10 miles, it was because the aristocracy was all wiped out in France that there was no ability to actually send messages across the whole of the Republic. And so they invented the visual telegraph, and that meant that suddenly you could produce signals going at 400 miles an hour, and that was the first time that transport and communication became separated, because before that time you had to either be on a ship to tell someone or not, and that's a fundamental change. And I think that the changes we're seeing now are all those media, all those notions before are present in them. It's not like, yeah, it's very new. All those machines that operated before now exist within the technologies we use.